Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.
Welcome to the show. Today is Tuesday. This is going out live on Mintwave Radio. If you already have the Alexa skill, you can just simply ask Alexa. If you're going to the website, you can actually download the skill if you don't have it. But also, this is on podcast. Now, we have our weekly schedule for all the podcasts that are on the network. So download the app for Apple and Android and feel free to subscribe to any that take your fancy. Now, today's episode is 173. And today we have Kelly Sparta, who is a transformational shaman. Shaman? How do I pronounce that? Shaman. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
And we're going to be... Yes. Are you a shaman? I don't know. It might be different over here to it is in America. I never know. So we're going to be talking about developing self-trust. Now, I'm your host, Karen Roberts, helping coaches and therapists get their message heard to the people who need to hear it. Now, Kelly is a transformational shaman who has been studying personal growth, metaphysics, ritual transformation and more for almost 50 years. She was doing self-hypnosis by the age of 10, reading tarot cards at 12 and doing psychic development. Now, today she shares her wisdom with spiritual students and teachers alike, helping them to develop stronger beliefs in themselves and to step more fully into their purpose in the world. So welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Karen.
So you've been doing this for quite some time. You're a bit of an expert. So you say that you were doing self-hypnosis by the age of 10. Would you like to share with the audience a little bit more detail about your path to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. My mother said I was talking to ghosts in my crib. And so my mother had been psychic when she was young and it scared her. And so she shut it down and she was never able to open it back up again. And she was absolutely committed to that not happening to me. And so she raised me in the New Age movement and took me to all sorts of teachers. She brought Est home when I was 5 years old, which for those of us old enough to know, that was a precursor to Landmark. It was a hardcore personal growth process. And we did Seth and Ram Dass and Abraham Hicks and JC Knight and the Silva method. And I don't even know everything. That was what we did on our evenings. Instead of watching TV, we listened to cassette tapes with all of these spiritual teachers. And so I spent my entire childhood just steeped in that. And we learned how to do my own guided meditations, learned how to do psychic readings and to expand my psychic gifts. And later in life, I also did healing work. And I went through Wicca to get to shamanism. So I walked that path for a while. And so I've got a lot of background in ritual, in retreats, and in doing all kinds of healing work and personal growth work with people. So coaching, you name it. So I've run the gamut.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yes, I've never personally listened to the Seth stuff, but I'm fully aware that Esther Hicks, Teachings of Abraham, that's how they started on their path, was through listening to Seth, and they wanted to do it themselves. So yes, love it. Love it. Yeah. So now you can offer absolutely everything. So when we talk about self-trust, what do you mean by that? I know we've been conditioned, right, to actually not trust ourselves because we've been conditioned through school to trust everybody else out there, your teachers, your parents, the powers that be. And we're told how we should be, which is possibly why your mother wanted to shut that down, that part of her down, because we've been told everything else. What are you talking about here? And why is it important to trust ourselves?
So self-trust is crucial because if you can't trust your own perception of things, if you can't trust your own beingness, your own ways of being, then you're constantly going to be on edge. You're constantly going to be looking around for somebody to find fault with you, for somebody to say it's not good enough, whatever. And so from a personal perspective, it's crucial just because it's the thing that allows us to feel comfortable in our own skin. And then from a practitioner level, it's even more important, because if you're a spiritual practitioner, now not only do you have to be able to trust yourself in terms of being who you are meant to be in the world and not worrying about whether or not other people are okay with that, right? But it's also about learning to trust your gifts and to be able to say yes and to claim them powerfully. Because one of the biggest challenges I see in the spiritual community in terms of the spiritual practitioners is that they're making like no money, none. And it's because they can't step into the value that they're providing and then be able to charge what that value is, right? There's ways in which we're trading validation instead of cash, right? Because I don't trust myself, so I need you to tell me I'm awesome, and then I'll charge you less, right? Because of that. Because you're getting paid halfway in validation, right? And so when you can step in and own your power, when you can step in and own the value that you bring to people's lives, when you can really grasp that what is easy for you is amazing to others. And that's the other piece, is that they often are like, it's just something I do. It's super easy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, the reason it's super easy is because you're a freaking prodigy, right? You're a prodigy. You're amazing at this. And it doesn't mean that we think it's less than. Prodigies are held up and raved about and in great demand. There's no reason why you shouldn't be that, except that you don't have that self-trust. So
Right.
it's that balance point, right?
Yeah. And so many of them, I suppose, you hear, because people say, oh, you shouldn't charge for it. And I have found that a lot of people who are the more woo, if you want to call it that, are excellent at giving. And I get it. They do it because they are passionate about their gift, about that they want to help people. But quite often they do have this block.
Yeah.
That I should only charge this amount. They won't step into their own. And at the end of the day, if you've got a gift like that, hello, shouldn't it's worth it, isn't it, to spend the money on it? But I have found that so many have this block about even charging money. Yeah. Where is that coming from? Is that coming from a fear and not really trusting? Where do you think that comes from?
So, ironically, so part of it comes from the morphic field of spirituality with the monks and the nuns and the priests and all of that, right? With the eschewing of material things as a pathway to higher spiritual experience, right? So part of it comes from that. People don't take into account that, like, the church pays to support the nuns and the priests. Yes, there are monks that will go out and beg on the streets and whatever, but if you don't want to be begging on the street, you don't want to be modeling that model. But ironically, another part of it, and this is something nobody really talks about, is that Aleister Crowley, who was the father of the modern day witch movement, right? OTO and the Golden Dawn and the whole nine yards there. He was big on telling people not to charge. And I had a question like this from a student of mine, like 2 days ago. He just asked me this question. He's, how do you regulate that? Because Crowley said this. I said, you have to understand the context that Crowley was talking from. Crowley was being actively pursued by the government in his area. They were trying to evict him from his premises. And they were doing so by any means they could possibly do. And so if the people who were operating out of his premises had been charging money, then they would have been able to say, you're operating a business in a residential zone, and here's a reason why we get to get you out, and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't necessarily that he was saying, don't charge for your spiritual gifts. He was saying, don't give them a reason to evict us. It's a very different thing, but people take things out of context and they universalize them, and then they say, oh, it's like this. In Native American tribes, the shaman is the spiritual teacher for the tribe. They're the spiritual connection. They're the healer. They're often many things to the tribe. That is their only job. The tribe supports them in every other way. The tribe feeds them and provides them with everything that they need in order to survive. And so the idea that you shouldn't charge is, yeah, they don't charge the tribe, but the tribe is supporting them. So it's a contextual thing, right? It's the same thing as all the time I get people saying, you shouldn't say you're a shaman. And I'm like, okay, let's have that conversation too. Because in most traditional shamanic practices where they're teaching you to be a shaman, they're like, you're never going to tell anybody you're a shaman, which is great if you are in a tribe that where everyone knows, one, what a shaman is, and two, who the shaman is. Because if those two things are true, you should never need to say the words, I am a shaman, ever. But we don't live in that world. We don't live in that world. I'm from the US. I live in Panama now. But many people in my culture have no idea what a shaman is, much less what a shaman does, much less how to find one. Okay.
So
I'm obligated to say that. I have to.
yeah. So to the listeners, explain what a shaman actually is and what they do.
Okay. So I'm going to start this answer with ask 100 shamans what a shaman is, and you'll get 100 different answers. Okay. So start with that. There are some foundational structures, but every shaman brings to the practice what their personal gifts are. And, what each one does is different depending upon what their gifts are. And traditionally, it is nature-based. It is a connection to ancestors. It is a connection to the earth and to being able to read the energetics of the situations, right? So your job as the shaman is to serve as spiritual guide for your tribe. Okay. And what that means depends on the tribe that you're working with, depends on what your gifts are that you use to do it and things like that. So for me, I'm a transformational shaman, which is a very specific kind. And I specifically work with people on their personal evolution. And so it's about finding a deeper connection to yourself, finding a stronger connection to your guides, to your ancestors, to the earth, to your spirit guides, to your power animals, to the fae and the elves and whatever else you want to be connected to, right? That's what I do, is I help you go deeper into spiritual connection, which I should say that there is a balance that's necessary to do that, right? You can't say, I just want to go out and do all this amazing, cool, magical stuff. You can, but you'll hit a limit. And the limit is either you will stop growing because you have exceeded your capacity to own the power that you have, right? We will stop ourselves from growing if we don't believe that we should have or that we're safe with our power, or if we don't believe that we're safe from other people because of our power. So many of us were killed in past lives for our gifts. That often comes up too. So that will stop you, or you will end up seeking your power outside of yourself and going down some very dark roads if you don't do your personal growth work alongside of your power work. And this is the important piece. We've all seen the people who are like, I'm going to do curses and I'm going to do this manipulative black magic stuff. And by the way, black magic is just anything that you do on someone else that you don't have their permission to do. That includes sending peace, love, and kindness because you don't have permission, right? So we need to understand that black magic is anything you do without permission. And so if you're doing it to someone and not with someone without their knowledge, then and permission, then it's black magic. And that's where people tend to go if they don't find their power within, which is what you get when you do that inner work.
It's so way beyond my understanding of this. Obviously, you've been doing this for so many years and you are teaching others. Yeah. So people who do have certain gifts. What is your take on all this? For me, on a conscious level, I think just because I don't have these gifts, but I think they're all available to everybody. We just haven't yet learnt how to tap in or whatever. Is that true, or is it only available for certain people?
I would say that is true for about 95% of people. There are a few people for whom their brains literally don't function in the same way that everyone else's does. And so therefore, I haven't found a way to get them there because that's not how their brains work. But they're usually not interested in going there either. So it's not that. But for 95% of the population, absolutely, there's no reason you can't do this work. Okay. It's a muscle like anything else. If you use it, it gets stronger. If you don't use it, it atrophies, right? Yeah.
So just like anything, yes, it takes practice. You got to hone your skills.
Yes.
So for you, okay, you said that you were reading tarot cards at age 12. So your mother had introduced you to a lot of these things. But so when did you really realize that, oh my goodness, I am psychic, I do have these abilities? And how did it affect your day-to-day life?
Yeah, so it's a funny story because I do have that crystallization moment of when I exactly figured it out. It took me way too long. I had lots of psychic experiences before that, but I didn't own it until I was like late 20s. I had been going to this spiritualist church. The spiritualist church does readings from the pulpit. They do mediumship. And every single time there was a reading, I would get more information. I would find the person at the coffee klatch afterwards and say, oh, blah, 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 blah. For what it's worth, this is what I got. And that was it. And then there was a friend of mine who would hang out with me at these events, and he did these classes after hours for people on different topics. They were just little 2-hour things on different things. And he called me up one day, and his speaker for that evening had canceled. They were sick and he didn't have anybody. And he's, I need to punt. Can you teach something, anything? And I was like, I'm taking a shiatsu class right now. I could teach what I know about shiatsu. And he's, yeah, okay, that's great. So I came in, and I'd never taught a class before at that point like that. And I came in and I started teaching the class, and 90 minutes into the 2-hour program, I ran out of everything I knew about shiatsu. And so he looked at me and he's, oh, why don't you just do readings for everybody? And they're going, oh yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. And I'm like, I don't have my cards. I don't have my cards. They're like, he's like, you don't need, you've told me things about myself all the time. You can do the things at the church. And I'm like, no, I don't do this. I don't do that. And I finally agreed because he was pushing. I finally agreed. And I said, look, I will do this with the understanding that absolutely everything that comes out of my mouth is probably wrong. Right. And they were like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And so I went around the room and I started telling people things that I had no right to know, like really detailed stuff. Okay, you're going away on vacation. You're doing it twice. You're going to go camping with the kids, and then you're going to do a marriage retreat. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, you've got 2 kids. And then I kept going back and forth. I had one person in the room who was terrified to have a reading done. And so she kept shoving all of her information into other people's readings. And so I'm like, I'm seeing twins who are 19. And I'm seeing kids that I've got 1 7, 2 boys, 7 and 9. They're like, yeah, the 7 and 9 are mine. And the woman who was terrified is like, the twins are mine. I'm like, okay. I'm like, you're going to Niagara? And she's, no. And she's going, we're going to Niagara. I'm like, okay. So it was hysterical. But I went around there were like 8 people. And there was one person there who I got nothing from. And he looked at me and he said, please do not judge your ability to do this based on me. I have gone to world-class psychics who have given me absolutely nothing. I am just not readable. And I looked at him and I went, I wonder why that is. And I was drawn back in time and I looked at him, 5 years old, and I said, here's how you put this shield up when you were 5 years old. And you had good reason to do it. And I'm not going into that here because it's nobody else's business, but this is how you can take it down if you would like to. And he was floored because it was more information than anybody had ever given him out of all the psychic readings he'd paid for in his life. And over the course of time, I told one guy he was a painter and he looked like a corporate executive. And I'm like, you paint for a living? He said, yeah, I'm a house painter. And I looked everywhere on his clothing, looking for little dots of paint on his shoes or in his hair or anything to give me some indication that I should know this. And there was nothing. And so by the time I got to the end of that set of readings, I had convinced myself, I'm like, I'm psychic because there's no way I could know this stuff. And that was the moment. And not to say I never questioned it again after that, because we love to doubt ourselves. But that's when I really stepped in. That's when I really did. Yeah.
Wow. How did it make you feel when, you had got it all right and you had been able to help people in a way that other people would never have been able to.
I didn't take it in at that level at the time. Mostly I was in shock. Mostly I was just like, I knew stuff. Oh, I can do this. I did give some really good advice at that point. There was a woman who was a primary caregiver for a loved one who really needed out, and there's nobody else to take over. I said, there is actually somebody who has decided that they're going to take over, but only if you quit. If you ask if they'll do it, they're going to say no. But they've decided that if you actually quit, that they'll do it. And she was like, oh my God, that's so useful for me to know. Even if I don't take advantage of it, I feel like I'm not trapped now. So, all of these things. But from my perspective, I was just more like, where did that come from? How did I do that? And even though I'd had all of these classes and I'd studied all this stuff and whatever, you don't give yourself credit for what you know when this is the other pernicious thing. It's the other icky thing that happens in this world, is that we just don't give ourselves credit. I asked somebody once to write me a list of everything they'd ever done, and they took and wrote a 10-year apprenticeship as a single line item. And I'm like, no, give me everything you did. They were like, oh, it was just an apprenticeship. I'm like, no, it's 10 years of apprenticing with someone who knew a whole bunch of stuff that you're giving yourself zero credit for by this single line item that doesn't say anything. But that's what we do. And that's where I was at that time, as I was just in this place of, wow, I blew myself out of the water and I didn't know what to do with it. Yeah.
That's such a common thing though, isn't it? I think for
Totally.
anybody to not give themselves credit. We've been conditioned to not blow our own trumpet or stop showing off or whatever. But actually that will have a knock-on effect, won't it? If we were to actually acknowledge and celebrate every win, and actually that is a good thing. That's not a selfish thing to do, isn't it?
No, it's totally necessary, actually.
Yeah.
It's completely necessary. I'm constantly working with spiritual practitioners on this, on really being able to step in and say, yes, this is what I do, and be confident in that. Because there's the other thing of, I don't trust it, right? It worked today, but will it work tomorrow? It's that other piece. Well, if I say this and somebody says no, what do I do then? It's, what if I'm wrong? What if you are wrong? I will tell you that most of the time you're probably not. I did a reading once. So when I had my store, there was this thing with the city where they wanted me to get a license as a fortune teller, and because they thought I was a charlatan, right? They thought I was a scam artist. And I went and did a booth at this event one day that had a lot of police officers at it. And this guy came up and he paid for a reading. And everything I told him, he went, nope. And I could see it clearly. And I'm like, okay, clearly I'm just not tuning in to you. I don't know what's going on, but here's your money back. And he said, no, you keep it. And then he sat and talked with me for a little bit. And I realized that everything I had said was right, but he was saying no to see what would happen if I got to the end, to see if I handed him the money back, because a scam artist would not do that. A scam artist would change their story and try and get him to buy in. But I didn't do that. I just told him what I knew to be true. And when he said no, I said, okay, clearly I'm just not tuned in here. So he knew I wasn't trying to scam people. And that helped me a lot with the city. But I didn't know that at the time because I wasn't looking for that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So how do you know? How do you know if you are completely on, or you've got it right, or like you said, you've got somebody else actually inputting their stuff into you? How do you separate it out?
Yeah. So I've had this situation happen a couple of times recently. I had one with one of my people that I've talked to, and one with a client of mine who asked a question. I had gotten a reading from somebody else and found that somebody else was reading her partner, not her. And I had the same thing happen where I was reading somebody who I knew. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like you, but this is everything that's coming through. And when I asked Spirit, they were like, yeah, we really need you to get this information, because the information is important, because this person is suicidal and their partner needs to know. Okay. So Once in a blue moon, I'll end up with somebody else's energy coming through, and it's because there's something important with that person, right? And when that happens, you'll get this sort of ding that happens as it comes through that goes, this isn't right. This isn't this person, but you're getting clear guidance that this is what you're supposed to say. So you just say it and you're like, this doesn't sound like you, but this is what they're telling me, blah, 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 blah. And they go, oh my God, that's my ex, my parent, my partner, my whatever, right? My sister, whatever. And you go, okay, they're not letting me read you because it's important that you know this about the person. Now, typically, I will not read anybody who's not in front of me saying that, yes, you have permission. But in those instances, I'm not being given the option. My guides are saying, here, you need this information because it's important it's basically your guardian angel coming in and getting help for you. And so in that case, I have higher power permission to do the reading because they're like, I need somebody to listen. And it's an emergency intervention for somebody who is in need. It's if you find somebody on the side of the road who's fallen down and unconscious, you have the permission to take care of them. It's like that.
It's not black magic anymore. If they say it needs to be done, they need to know, then that's it.
And I want to be clear, this is rare because people who need to establish their value by giving messages will oftentimes go, oh, my guides told me. And it's not that often. No, I've had it happen twice in my entire life. Okay. This is not something you should be doing every 30 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like you've really got to trust everything that's coming in. So for other practitioners, how is that really, you've said there a little bit about how it's going to affect their spiritual practice, but how, this is going to have a massive impact on them.
Yes.
But so how do they go about it? When you say, hey, you've just got to trust, but if they don't trust, how are they going to learn to trust?
Yeah. So proof is a wonderful thing. Do as many readings as humanly possible for as many people you don't know as humanly possible. And eventually you will prove it to yourself because you can't be right that many times about people you have no idea about. And I say it's important to do it with people you don't know because you'll talk yourself out of it with people you do. You'll be like, oh, it was a logic leap. It was totally reasonable. I knew this about them and that about them and whatever. There are lots of places that you can go online to do free readings on Facebook and lives and whatever. There's all sorts of ways that you can do this, but get in as much practice as you possibly can while you're practicing, right? So I don't have a problem with giving away free readings as long as you're in practice mode. And then I also don't have any problem giving away free readings as long as it's not more than 10% of your practice. We've all gotten gifts from time to time. I did healing work on some guy here locally at a little food market because his knee, he was sitting there talking to another guy I knew and he was talking about how his knee was better. I'm like, no, it isn't. And he's, what? I said, your knee isn't better. It's not better. You're just pretending it's better. Stop hurting it. And he was like, how do you know that? And I'm like, I'm looking at your knee. It's telling me that there's a problem. I said, if you want to sit down, I can reestablish the energy flow. He had knee surgery. I said, I can reestablish the energy flow so it can actually heal if you'd like. And I didn't charge him for that session because I looked at him and called him on it. And we all give away things from time to time, but you can't make your practice about being on donation. You can't make your practice about giving away things unless you are independently wealthy, in which case you can do whatever you want. But know that you are creating karmic debt because you are not providing the person with a way to balance the scales of giving and receiving.
So, that is something that I have thought that, and this is the answer to people that are struggling to charge because, I've always said that there's an energy. Money is just energy.
Right.
So if it's not flowing, then there's a block. So actually you're causing more harm than good by not. And like you say, it's okay to give in certain situations. Yeah, you're going to get it back from somewhere else.
Right. But pay that forward and whatever, right? But you're giving from a place of overflow, not from a place of emptiness. And that's the important difference. Right? If your needs are taken care of and you have overflow, and you have the extra energy because you've managed your energy well too, which is another thing that spiritual practitioners are not so great at. Then if you're giving from the overflow of your energy, and you're giving from the abundance of you having all your needs met, by all means, pay it forward, and they can then pay it forward to somebody else as time goes on. But otherwise, you've got to run a business, not a charity, because you're not getting grants. Charities live on grants.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So how does it impact someone when they do step into their spiritual teaching or their healing roles?
So a personal perspective, the difference between being fully stepped in and not being fully stepped in is a difference between feeling like you belong where you are and feeling like you're pretending to be where you are. Like you're faking it till you make it sort of thing.
Are you talking about imposter syndrome there?
Yes, very much. And from a receiver end, you're not going to get a solid healing or session from somebody who is feeling like they're pretending. There's going to be codependency issues in there. I see that all the time. One of the big red flags I tell people, if you're going in for a healing session and somebody says they're going to remove all your blocks, run in the other direction as fast as you possibly can. Because their ego is attached to removing all your blocks, whether those blocks are ready to go or not. There is a timing to these things. We need to respect that timing. And anybody who says I'm removing all your blocks, they're in their ego, and it's not about your healing. It's about them proving that they're awesome. And that's a very different state of being to be in, and you're going to get damaged by that. And it's a very different experience when you're working with a master healer, a master coach, or a master practitioner, a reader, or whatever, because their value is not attached to what they're providing you. They are a clear channel. They don't have their personal crap all mixed up with your message or your energy, right? And so they are clear and able to provide exactly what the universe is trying to give you without getting in the way of it. But if you haven't done your inner work, if you haven't been able to step in and say, yes, these are my gifts and I fully embrace them, then now you're stuck in a position where you're all up in your head while you're supposed to be a clear channel, and you're going, how is this landing? And is that okay? And did they, and maybe you step in for a few minutes and then they go, really? And you go, oh, I don't know. And then you're out again. And it's all of this that goes on. And the reason I can say this is because, I've been through it. I get it. I understand. But it is the wounded healer archetype, and they have a name for it for a reason. So
is it like, for instance, I don't know, I come from the fitness industry, right, myself originally, and as a healing point of view, as a sports therapist. So when you're talking with the physical body, like we know that, say, for instance, somebody wants to lose weight, right? It's not going to happen overnight. There are laws to the universe. It's going to take time. If you are consistent with this, maybe you could do this. You could achieve this in 12 weeks. And the same with healing, I don't know, a torn muscle, a torn ligament, torn tendon. There is a natural state. Is there a similar pattern when you're dealing with spirit, when you're dealing with energy? Like you say, if somebody says they're going to remove all your blocks in one go, that might be. So is it a fact that it's not going to happen overnight? And is time even a thing with regards to this? Or would the clearing or the healing still take time as it would with the physical body?
So the answer is it depends. Okay. The amount that it depends is based on the buy-in of the client, and 2, the amount of belief structures that energetic is reflecting in the field. And if the client is fully bought in and they're like, you are the panacea of everything, and I am ready for whatever comes, and I'm willing to release whatever is there, and they are fully in, it can happen like that, right? If they're not bought in for some reason, or if there's a belief structure that they're attached to that is creating that energetic. So for instance, Louise Hay talks about how breast cancer, for instance, is tied to a lack of self-nurturance. Okay. So if they're attached to this belief structure that their value is based on what they produce, and they therefore have to overproduce in order to be valuable, to be lovable, and then they're overworking and failing to nurture themselves and failing to care for themselves because they're so desperately trying to be valuable and lovable, then you're going to have a block to clearing the breast cancer, right? Because they are still attached to the belief structure that is creating the breast cancer. So the answer is it depends. And just as I don't know, I feel like I want to throw this in there. As a healer, sometimes you look at something and you're like, it's too late. It's gone too far before I got to it. And all I can do is just clean up and try and make things easier, but I can't fix it. Don't forget, you could turn back time and heal it back then.
Wow.
So that is an advanced level healing skill, but there's somebody listening to this that needed to hear that. So just dial the time back to a time when you could clear it. Like cancer is a classic example. If you catch it before it metastasizes, then you've got a much better chance of clearing it. So like just dial back time to the time when it was not metastasized, and then release it from the surrounding tissues so that it can be removed when the surgeons go in to release it.
Wow.
And I say that because typically the belief structure of the person that you're working on will not support there being no cancer there. Why would you not just roll it back to no cancer? If they haven't gotten the diagnosis yet, then you absolutely can roll it back to no cancer. But if they've gotten the diagnosis, most people's belief structures will not allow for it to not be there. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do you think things are changing? Yeah. I mean, there's more and more people in just the self-development arena. I think more and more people have been put in front of it in the last, I don't know, 10 years since The Secret. Is it 10 years? It's more than 10 years. 2003, I think I got The Secret.
That's a long time. It's 20 years now, honey.
I'm old. Really? And that's just to realise that, oh my God, that's 20 years. So in the last 20 years then, that helped things go a lot more mainstream as it was introduced to a lot more people. And Joe Dispenza, there is definitely... I don't have stats, but my perception is that it has definitely grown a lot. It's more and more people are
24 years now. So
into that. But do you think there's a change now? Okay, what you're sharing is, for me, my perception is like we're on a whole other level now. We're into bucket loads of woo-woo, not sprinkling anymore. No. But do you see a shift in the overall, I don't know, people being more open to it now?
Yeah. I think it depends on where you are. When I moved from Boston to Richmond, Virginia, the openness changed dramatically. I would go out and say I'm a transformational shaman, and I would get the response of, my pastor says that's of the devil. And it depends on where you are. But Richmond also had this burgeoning community of all these people who were trying to study witchcraft and energetics and personal growth. There's a huge community there, even though I kept getting that response. And I would say that in the US, that the big shift happened in 2016 when this massive amount of Democrats got floored by Trump getting elected, and they felt like they couldn't do anything about the outside world, and so they turned inward to do their inner work. There was a huge amount of influx into the spiritual community at that time. And then with 2020 and the COVID lockdowns, where everybody was put into a forced hermitage, which is a traditional spiritual practice, right? You go into hermitage to go inside of yourself, to dig out all of the things and to get clear about what you will and will not accept in your life, and then make choices to move powerfully forward. People were forced into hermitage for a year and a half. It was transformational to even people who didn't want it to be transformational, right? And so we had another huge influx of business into the spiritual world with people in that state going, I can't be with myself and I can't hide with other people anymore because I'm stuck in my house. What do I do? And so there was a huge influx at that point too. And so what's happened is that the people who came in 2016 are now at a point where they're now being practitioners, right? They're at that place where they're like, okay, I'm ready to go out in the world. And the problem is that there is very little in the way of a holistic curriculum for those people. And that's because the entire industry is siloed, right? So you've got wellness here, you've got Reiki here and energy healing, you've got personal growth here, you have yoga here, and it's all in little silos. And then all the different religions are their own silos. And so the challenge is that every silo has wisdom. And it all relates to one another, but they don't talk to one another.
Oh, I hear
and it's
you.
all incomplete wisdom because they're seeing one facet of the huge diamond that is all that is, right? And so what I have struggled to do and strive to do, I should say, I'm not really struggling, I'm striving, but what I've strived to do in this process is to break down those walls and to cross-pollinate between the different silos so that people can learn from each other's wisdoms and so that we can begin to see the bigger diamond that is the all that is, right? Because it is huge and beautiful. It's so funny because I have a podcast that I started 5 years ago. It's called Spirit Sherpa. And when I started it, it was a beginner's podcast. And I was doing very basic things, right? And like a month and a half into my podcast, all of my friends who were 10, 15, 20 years into their spiritual journeys were saying, oh my God, I love your podcast. And I'm like, why? Why are you even listening to my podcast? It's a beginner's podcast. It's like basic stuff. And they're like, no, you don't understand. You're taking every 2-hour class I've ever taken in my entire life, and you're stitching it together into a big worldview. And I was like, I am? And they're like, yeah. I had no idea I was doing it. No idea. It made perfect sense because in my head, it is a big world picture because I've been living and eating and breathing this stuff since I was very little. And so to me, it just makes sense. But for everybody else, we're all stumbling around in the dark. It's like you get a class here and a class there and a book here and a podcast there and a video here and a retreat there. And how do they interrelate? I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And when you get to the level of practitioner, now you're like, okay, I'm going to go get certified in a couple of things so that I feel like I have some ground to stand on. But I'm not really even sure what my gift is that I'm supposed to bring to the world. And I'm just doing other people's stuff. And where do I go from here? That's the big question for the spiritual practitioners who came in 2016 and are now 7 years into their journey. And they're like, okay, what is mine to bring to the world? And part of that's exploring your gifts. And part of it's stepping into your power and your purpose and your sovereign and being able to claim that you are sovereign in the space and that nothing can throw you off your balance.
Brilliant.
That mastery that you have to step into at that level. Yeah.
Love it. I've always thought, even back when I was a sports therapist, it used to frustrate me. I used to think, why don't people work more together? Like you say, everybody's doing little segments of things and they're all claiming that this is the right way for that. And you think, look, they're all right for the right person at the right time. If only people work together. So for instance, if I was working with a chiropractor, I could release the muscles enough so that when they went to the chiropractor, they had an easier way of manipulating the joints without hurting them. It works together. And the difference between reflexology, all these different modalities in the holistic arena, I always used to think everybody should come together because then you can treat the person, you can look at them and go, they would probably benefit from this and this.
Yes.
And there isn't one size fits all. And so from what you shared there, it sounds like the same with all this stuff, because like you say, yoga's how many thousands years old? The ancient Chinese had their methods. Somebody else have and they're all right or parts, little bits, and putting it into the whole for practitioners to then really to step into the power. Love it. I do think that seems to be the way things are moving is, you've got to, there isn't just one way. If you've got lots of tools in your toolbox, then you can totally hone in on that person and treat them with XYZ.
Yes, exactly.
So to the listeners, who is it that you are looking for to help? So you obviously offer training for practitioners. What are the types of practitioners are you talking about here?
The people that I work with are people who have already got their businesses up and running. They're doing at least $50,000 a year in their business. They have a sense of their abilities, but they may not be really solid per se, all the way up to people who are doing multi-million dollars in their businesses. And now they're looking to take their business to the next level, right? So but not just their business themselves, their abilities, their inner work, because there's a point that you hit in your spiritual practice where you look at everything that's out there and you go, yeah, I could teach that. Yeah, I could teach that. Yeah, I've done that before. Or you go to something that you think is going to be exciting and you get there and suddenly the container is terrible and you're on duty and you're taking care of people because somebody's doing something that's flat out dangerous and you're just like, wow, I've been there many times. And so have my students. And the people I work with are those people. They're the people who are really looking to take their work to the next level. They don't want to be in a room with a bunch of their students or their potential students because that keeps them from doing their work because they feel like they have to be on. They're looking to do a deeper level of connection with themselves, a deeper level of connection with the universe and with nature. They're really looking to step into that higher level of knowledge of how everything interconnects and how everything works so that they can take their personal work to that next level, so that they can have that next piece of the puzzle to share with their audience. I'm working with people who are 5, 6, 7 steps down the road, and they're ready to really amp up to the next level and fully step into their power, their purpose, and their sovereignty. And that's where I work with people. I work with them from the very beginning all the way through to super advanced level. And for the super advanced level people, I actually do a one-on-one shaman on call service. So we literally we're in interaction all the time.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So you also do stuff to people that are maybe don't realize their gifts. Do you start back at even that basic level for people who?
I do at the moment.
But not
we
for
are
much
in the
longer.
process of shifting. This is the last opportunity to get in for that because we are actually in the process of shifting to only doing work with spiritual practitioners, just because there is such a need for that and so few people actually offering it. And there's a lot of people who offer stuff for the beginners. So I'm trying to take care of the people that really don't have a lot of places to go. But yeah, I'm even doing retreats. People come to Panama, small retreat groups where we do in-person work on the energetics and really being able to master those energetics and up-level those skills. Yeah.
Wonderful. So what sort of trends do you see occurring within your sort of whole industry? Like you say, you've seen things change, obviously out of the madness of, I won't even mention it, but what do you see changing over the near future within this sort of industry?
So one of the most disturbing trends that I see for beginners, and this has been going on increasingly over the last 20 years as marketers get into the spiritual field and start marketing aphorisms and stuff that they don't even understand. And that's one of the biggest challenges that I see is how do you tell if somebody knows their stuff or not? Because there's a lot of random crap out there. And that's even more true on the internet, where I've found things that are actively damaging if you did them. Like I've had students bring me spells that they found on the internet. And they're like, well, should I do that? I'm like, don't do that. And they're like, why? I said, do you see these 2 lines? That's you handing over all your power to the person who wrote the spell. And they're like, oh my God. I'm like, don't do that. The entire first year of my podcast is spiritual don'ts. It's just don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other thing. You're going to be in trouble. It's just me being mama bear going, oh, okay, I know it feels like it's a good idea, but don't do it. So that's one of the most disturbing trends that I've seen. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think it's actually going to get worse as people start using AI, because the AI is going to go out and mine all of the crap that's already out there and just regurgitate it. And
Very
it's just
true.
going to get repopulated, and people are going to go, it's in 15 different places, it must be true. No.
Yes, I suppose that's the danger. Is this why people are so wary of this sort of thing? Because there have been so many charlatans, and it's one of those, I suppose it's one of those things, because you can't It's not something you can see or touch. There's not things that they can prove to themselves. How do they know if somebody has got the gift and is using it correctly and safely?
Yeah.
And not, I suppose.
There are some red flags that you can look for. If the person is putting themselves up as a guru on high and saying, you should follow me because I know everything, then be really careful about that person, because they're in their ego and they're not doing their work. Okay. If their ego is big, they're not doing their work and they're not going to be great teachers. So that's step number one. That I tell people all the time. People try to put me up on a pedestal and I'm like, look, I'm you. I'm just like you. I've been through all the crap you've been through. I have weaknesses just like you. There's no reason you can't get to where I am if you just step forward into your path. And that's the path. That's what a true teacher is going to do. They're going to say, because if you let somebody leave you on a pedestal, there's a distance between you and them. And then they think they can't get there, that you're special in some way and that they're not special. And so therefore they can't get there. And that's such a disservice to the person who's trying to get there. So you got to yank yourself off that pedestal as much as humanly possible as a teacher, so that they can feel like there is a chance to get there, right? Because that's what they want. So that's number one, is if they're hanging onto their pedestal by that way, then that's a problem. The other thing I would say is talk to somebody who has stopped working with that person, because how you leave that person is an indicator of who you're dealing with. If they have really good feelings about the person that they worked with and they're grateful and they're happy and they had a good parting, then that's a good person to work with. If they said, I'm honoring of the work that we've done together and I feel complete, and the teacher looks at them and says, you're not ready. These are all the things that are wrong with you, and really tears them down, that's because that teacher was using their energy. That's what happens, is that when we start studying with someone, we hand them a piece of our energy, right? We hand them over the piece of power that says, I'm going to trust you to guide me, just like you would if you were hiking the Himalayas and the Sherpas know the right path.
Yeah.
It is appropriate to hand them that part of your power that says, I'm going to let you pick the path because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And so you do that with a spiritual teacher to a certain extent. But if you don't when you go to pull that back, they try to hold on to it, that's a problem. Okay. They should be, we steward that energy for our students. We steward it. We don't own it. We don't get to use it. We just steward it. It's, here, yes, you can hang that here. And whenever you're ready to take it back, you just take it back. I'm not keeping it from you. I'm not even holding on to it. You hooked it onto my field, and that's fine. I'm happy to have it be there, but you can take it back anytime you want. That's the correct response. So talk to somebody who left the practice, and that's another way to know whether or not you're dealing with a good teacher.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So for the listeners, if they are interested in finding out more, how do they get hold of you? What is the process?
So my email address is kellysparta.com, just like you see it on the screen. It's Kelle. So make sure you get that right, or else you'll be in the wrong place. And if they want to check me out on my podcast, it's spiritsherpapodcast.com. And Sherpa is SHERPA, just like the people who carry your stuff up the mountains in the Himalayas, right? Yeah. Or you can email me direct at kellysparta.com. Yeah.
Fantastic. Look, thank you so much for your time today. It's a fascinating subject. I absolutely love it. So thank you for the time. And to the listeners, look, if there's any coaches out there and you're looking to take your business to the next level, then we can offer your own radio show or podcast channel, allowing you to get your message heard by a wider audience than ever before. But also, if you need funnels, membership sites, anything like that's going to help you scale your business, then get in touch. You can go to the website, KarenRobertsCoaching.com/discovery and book a call. So I will be back. Where are we? I will be back only in a couple of days on Thursday with a Coffee with Karen. Bye for now.
Bye.
Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a